Entrepreneurs aren't born, they are made through failures, breakthroughs, and relentless hustle. Welcome to the Empowered Entrepreneur TV show. This is your host Rohit Soni, airing across 185 countries, 26 plus TV networks, 100 plus podcast stations. This is where visionaries share their unfiltered journeys, strategies, and game changing insights. Your success story starts here. This is more than just a show, it's a movement. Watch, learn, and elevate. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Empower Entrepreneur TV show. This is your host Rohit Soni, and today it's like I usually tell you, it's going to be an amazing story and maybe a vision that can set your life apart, or maybe a thing that can actually take your life to the next level, but with strategies, with dedicated action, and most importantly, a journey that might inspire you today. And like I usually share on all my TV shows that I've done until now, always make notes because today's story is going to be the most inspiring that I've done and I've heard. So, let me just introduce you to our guest today. He is Todd Khozein. He's the co-founder of SecondMuse, and it's a journey of a visionary whose life story is as powerful as his mission, from fleeing persecution in Iran to founding one of the most impactful innovation ecosystem companies in the world. Todd has dedicated his life to building systems that empower people and protect the planet. So, I'd like to welcome him on the stage. Hi, Todd, my friend. How are you doing?
Hey, right. Doing really wonderful. It's great to be here with you.
Yes, Todd. Like I told all our viewers right away, it's going to be an inspiring journey. And I want you to go all in for them and share each and every detail that can inspire them to take in actions so that they can be empowered. It's very simple. The concept of the show is very simple. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, like a little bit more about SecondMuse as well, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, of course. Second Muse is a company that is focused on building economies and markets that are good for people, that are good for planet. Our economies and our markets cause an extraordinary amount of harm in the world, both to humans and huge swaths of the human family, but also to the planet, like we're seeing with the effects of climate change. But the thing is that it doesn't have to be that way. And so as you and I have spoken, my journey in trying to understand this started pretty young. I was born in Iran just before the revolution. My family were Baha'i, and so we were severely persecuted during the revolution, and so we fled. And ended up in Latin America, which is where I grew up. And so this question about justice and why does one group of people treat another group of people poorly, what's the reason, is something that I really grew up with very deep in my heart, and that's something that I struggled with as a child. Of course, as I grew up, I realized it wasn't just me. It wasn't just uh, my faith. It just wasn't just my part of the world. This happens everywhere. This reality that one group of people will harm another group of people, will not treat them well, and oftentimes there's economic justifications and there's economic motivations around this. And so this really kind of was foundational, I think, in my journey of trying to understand this relationship between justice and the economy, and does it have to be this way, and why is it this way that we see it?
Well, I really like that you touched upon one, maybe community would be the word, one group of people to another group of people. So, like we discussed, let's go a little bit deep down. And like your journey from Iran to Ecuador and eventually to the US is incredibly inspiring, by the way. So, how did those early experiences of prosecution and displacement shape your worldview and ultimately influence the founding of Second Muse? Like, how did that connect? Because a lot of people, when they go through adversity like that, they fall off. They're unable to do what they want to do. they're involved into things that are not good for them and are destroying the world. So how did you change your view, started something, and actually took your life to the next level and empowered yourself?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I have my, I think I have the beliefs of my faith to thank with that. We were Baha'is, and then kind of growing up, there's a few fundamental ideas that I think I grasped from my faith. One of them is this idea that we are inherently noble, and that we all inherently have virtue and good inside of us. The second idea, and this was really powerful for me, because when you are harmed from the outside, sometimes you can mistake that by thinking maybe I deserved it, or you can mistake it by thinking maybe I did something that it was my fault. And again, this is, we all experience some kind of harm as we go through life. We experience some different forms of of oppression. But this other idea that I grew up with was this idea that I can, and it is my responsibility to contribute to a world that is going in a particular direction. So this idea of myself uh, being an essential participant in the direction that the world is going was also something that I drew from. And I think that when these bad things happen to us, these two ideas really helped. One is that the things that happened to me weren't really my fault, or weren't really inherently because of who I am. And the second thing was really that it doesn't matter what happened. We can take pain and we can weave it into a much stronger foundation of who we are, and we can arise to do something. Now, there's a lot of luck oftentimes that you need to be able to get something right, and but I think that these were two foundational and fundamental beliefs that I had. I think that the third thing was that I was a third culture child, and so my father came from one culture, my mother came from another culture, and I grew up in a separate third culture. And I think that one of the things that I noticed growing up is that different people that came from different situations, childhoods, cultures, saw one similar situations in multiple different ways. And so, growing up as a third cultural child, as I'm sure many of your viewers are, sort of allowed me to realize this essential truth that just because somebody is thinking differently than you doesn't mean that one of you is right and one of you is wrong. But there's an incredible strength and an incredible power when you're able to weave together multiple diverse perspectives. And in this case, diversity is actually a foundational ingredient for resilience, which of course is one of our foundational economic beliefs that we develop markets in. And so I think that those are some of, there's obviously a lot more, but I think that those were some of the foundational, at least as growing up as a child, that sort of wove their way into the work of SecondMuse.
And I believe, Todd, you touched upon a point of resilience, and we'll talk a lot more about it in our show later on. So, one of the things that I've seen as well is when you go through adversity, when you go through challenges, when you go through problems that are out of your control, and you see all that, you grasp all that, it brings the best version of you when you stand up. And you have to stand up for what's right. But before you do all those things, you have to stand up for yourself, what you believe in, because there are a lot of people out there who can make you feel a lot less than who you actually are. But it's actually important to take people with you and elevate them to a level that you want them to. So that's what a leader does. And I believe that's what you guys do at Second Muse. But I'd love to know a lot more about it. Right now, uh, the thing at this point in this world, I believe that's needed is more peace, more understanding, and then I believe grit, resilience, and passion and determination to make things from not happening to happening, to take people who are unable to do something to be able to do something. And yeah, that's my point of view on what you shared. And right now, guys, we have to go into a quick break. But before the break, I believe I already told you why this show is very important for you. Now, because Todd has just shared some of his journey, early life journey right now, that doesn't mean there's not a lot more on this show. The big thing we're gonna be talking about after he comes back is how he's working with cities, states, and Fortune 500 companies to build climate resilience and sustainable innovation. So, we're going to come back after this quick break, less than 2 minutes. So, I'll see you on the other side.
SecondMuse is a leading innovation firm that builds more resilient economies by designing real-world solutions like climate tech programs and economic development strategies. These create jobs, safeguard the health and well-being of communities for the long term, and unlock investments. For over 15 years, we've partnered with the city and state of New York to develop their climate tech economy, taking hundreds of new technologies to market. We've designed financial instruments for some of the leading investment funds in the world and developed programs that support mental well-being startups. We've worked across 180 countries, prototyped over 33,000 solutions, supported over 2,000 ventures, and mobilized over $1.3 billion in investment, including $880 million in direct funding to power high-impact startups and initiatives. Our services help leaders and innovators navigate evolving landscapes, develop game-changing innovations, and bring ambitious dreams to life, especially when they seem out of reach. At SecondMuse, we fuel sustainable growth while delivering measurable benefits for businesses, communities, and the planet.
All right, welcome back to the Empowered Entrepreneur TV show. This is your host, Rohit Soni, and today we are here with Todd Khozein, the co-founder of SecondMuse and a global leader in building innovation ecosystems that drive impact. Todd, let me just have you on the stage again. Let's talk about your work with cities and corporations. You've worked with cities, states, and global companies to develop climate ecosystems and foster resilience. What are some key strategies that SecondMuse uses that help these entities not just adapt but thrive in the face of climate challenges that go around the world?
Yeah, so that's a big question. I mean, I think that one of the really important things from you know when we think about supporting entrepreneurs is that we really think about supporting entrepreneurs with an eye towards building a broader market or a broader ecosystem. And when we think about ecosystems or economies or markets and what are they composed of, they are certainly the entrepreneurs and the people that are building these new technologies. But a successful entrepreneur is not just made because of the right product market fit. The largest influencer in the success or of an entrepreneur and their technology is actually the environment within which they in. Are there corporations, bigger corporations, multinational corporations that are going to buy their product or buy their service? And is there a pathway for those relationships to be established? Are there policymakers who can develop the right kinds of policies that are going to be supportive and that will help you solve the problems that you actually are solving instead of the problems that they might think that you're having? Is there the right capital infrastructure? Do you have investors or somebody to provide you an early grant or a research grant or provide you a loan when you actually need it to bridge between a contract and the delivery of that contract? Do you have the right physical infrastructure around there? If you're a manufacturing business, is there even a place that you can put the machine if you are able to buy the machine, in a sense, to create it? And are you able to hire the right people? And so in many cases, as we're developing and supporting entrepreneurs, and we support about 1,000 entrepreneurs and innovators every year, a lot of times we're thinking about simultaneously working with all of the other actors that are around there just to make sure that the success of this entrepreneur, there will be 100 other entrepreneurs behind them that will be able to be successful because we've removed the barrier, not just for them, but for all the entrepreneurs are coming. And we tend to also think about large markets. So when we think about, for example, climate change, and again, we fundamentally believe that growth of economy and the growth of markets do not need to come at the expense of human dignity or of the health of the planet. We believe that economies can and should grow where everybody that that is alive can participate meaningfully in that economy, and there's nothing inherent about economic growth that needs to harm the planet. And so when we think about markets like climate, like the climate market, the climate transition is a $275 trillion transition on the more conservative side that we're currently in over the course of the next 2.5 decades. And so we're talking about an enormous economic transition. And when we think about the GDP of the United States, for example, we're talking about a $30 trillion. So it even dwarfs the size of the largest economy in the world. And so we think about these big markets and these big opportunities, or in the case of mental health that we think about, and the amount of energy and amount of productivity strictly from an economic perspective that will emerge if you're able to to solve some of these problems and take some of these technologies to market is pretty extraordinary. And so, the actual support that we provide our entrepreneurs is very nuanced. So we don't take a cookie cutter approach. We think about who is the entrepreneur, or this class of entrepreneurs, and what are the problems that they're solving? Where are they in the world? So we have 15 offices around the world, in North America and in South and Southeast Asia. And then what is the market that they're trying to enter into? And at the intersection of these three is when we think about how do we support our ultimate entrepreneurs? So, and I'm happy to later to give you some concrete examples. How do we support them so that we're solving real problems, not imaginary problems, timely problems, not a problem that they may face 5 years in the future, and problems that ultimately the market is looking for to make sure that they're able to have success as an entrepreneur.
I love the point that you're able to support them problem based on where their situation is, not just a cookie cutter solution, because a lot of companies do that. And have you ever known an instance, Todd, that you saw a city or company which was directly impacted by SecondMuse immediately? Any instance that you saw? Could you shed light on those things that has happened?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, multiple different examples. So we've been around for about 17 years. We've been under contract with the city and state of New York for the last 13 years, as an example, really helping to build a climate tech economy. And it's interesting because a lot of times, what gets attention is that in the last couple of years, our entrepreneurs that have been in the programs, we've been able to raise almost $500 million of investments into these technologies, and oftentimes that gets a lot of attention. But when we think about where this started, it was working with visionaries in the city of New York and the state of New York, on the government side, and we were struggling just to deploy low millions of dollars in the right way. But you see, because of the efforts and of a very large a group of actors, ourselves included, but certainly we were not alone. There were many other ones. We were able to really build a market where one did not exist before, and so from there, there's also been much smaller cities where we've been able to do work. We've worked on waste management in a 6-country region in Southeast Asia, for example. Really to help build a waste management economy to help stem the tide of plastics going into the ocean. We've worked with much smaller cities in the United States, like Fort Myers in Southwest Florida, or in Michigan. Where we're thinking about what are the problems that this city is facing, what are the unique opportunities that this is facing, and how are we going to structure the support of entrepreneurs and the support of economic actors so that it can really take advantage of the unique elements that exist in that city. One of the things that we are really try to emphasize is don't try to copy another part of the world. Learn from other people. Like something that happens somewhere else in the world we can learn from it and we can sort of build off of it. But every city is unique, and every country is unique, and every region of the world is unique. And if you can use that uniqueness to your benefit, then you can build something that is truly creative, truly unique, and makes a unique contribution to the global economy. And so that ends up being a very important part of the way that we think. But these are concrete changes. In 2023 alone, not only was there almost $700 million that was raised from ventures in New York from climate tech economies, but there were 133,000 jobs that were created. And so these are good paying jobs. And so these programs have very concrete economic benefit in addition to having significant social benefit as well as significant environmental benefit.
And I see that, Todd, like SecondMuse is all about boosting businesses, boosting job growth as well. And maybe as I read through your profile as well before we did the show, it's all about infrastructure. So how do you approach this ecosystem creation so that it leads to long-term economic solution for countries or places which don't have too many resources, which are unable, maybe? I can give you a name of a country, maybe in Africa, if you see. There are a lot of places where people are not that much rural. So if you were in a place to help those countries and people from there in all the levels from your company, how would you support them?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is one of the things again is digging back to the place that anywhere the questions that I ask are. So oftentimes there's a critique of, yeah, but there's no pipeline. Yeah, but there's no, where are the entrepreneurs going to come from? Where are the resources going to come from? The question that I ask is, what does exist? Are there smart people that are trying to solve real problems that have motivation to be able to be successful? The answer is going to almost always be yes. We're doing work in a couple of different countries, sort of within Africa, in the continent in the moment, and there's extraordinary. Not only is there extraordinary talent, but there's more money that flows out of the country than money that flows into the country. And so one of the things that which means that clearly there's enough resources as long as we were structuring it right. I think one of the challenges is that sometimes we try to structure economic activity based on the models that may or may not work somewhere else in the world. So for example, when we think about capital, a lot of times when we talk about capital or when we talk about financial resources, we think, for example, from a venture lens, venture capital lens and raising money and this. Whereas there's many different types of financial instruments that we could use. There's lots of blended types of financial instruments. We can really think about the financing and the capitalization of a broader ecosystem where maybe entrepreneurs will work together in different ways. Now, that said, as where there is less resources, there needs to be more coordination. Where there is more coordination is always going to be more valuable than more resources. And so there's almost a forcing function of being able to coordinate in a particular direction in the absence of resources that could pay that has the possibility of paying real dividends in the future from a strictly economic lens. And what I would encourage economic development actors in areas that might not have the same resources is really to think about unique uses of those resources instead of falling into traditional financial resources. There's an ability to use financial resources in creative ways where we mix together equity and debt and maybe non-dilutive capital in interesting ways that you can sort of kickstart economic activity. Particularly in places, again, I mean, you mentioned the continent of Africa. I mean, one of the greatest resources of the continent of Africa is the extraordinary percentage of population that's young. I mean, there is an incredible. I mean, there's nowhere else in the world that's like that. In terms of power. So I think that the question is, what resources are we talking about, and how are we structuring and mobilizing the resources that do exist in a particular area, to be able to meet economic goals that also have social and environmental upside.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example, Todd, and this is what I've seen. So there's an organization called Enactus who I used to work with back in 2019 when I was in college. So what we used to do is we ran projects in underprivileged areas in India. So we went into a slum, and in that slum, we had a woman who was unemployed. And then what we did was very simple. We did a donation drive in the college. We got a lot of books, a lot of pencils, pens, and we went to those areas and we helped her set up a shop where she could sell those things and earn a living while we are creating growth there by helping children buy pencils, books at prices which are not even 25% of the market price. So we're doing three things at the same time, Todd. Number one, we're giving someone an employment. Second, we're uplifting the society. Third, we're giving young children a chance to actually grow and propel. And I believe what you guys do at SecondMuse is something on a bigger scale and helps a lot more people. And I'm just giving you an example. Even doing that, it took a lot of time and effort. So I get it where you guys come from. And I get it how hard sometimes it gets. And into those moments when things sometimes work out, sometimes don't work out. So how does Todd in those situations deal with everything? So I just want to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. As a matter of fact, I would say that there's extraordinary similarities. I think that scale is not as important as people make it out to be. I think that the question is, the world is kind of confused in terms of how do we build our markets and our economies. And it could be that the secret, or some insights to the reality of the future global economy is in the work that you're doing, at that level. Because if you think about somebody that doesn't have a job, there's an extraordinary cost to society around there. And so when you're reversing that from being a cost to society to being a value to society, where a person is productive, they're able to generate, some income, they're able to create something, it goes from a minus to a plus in so many different ways. And most importantly, it inspires those around her to say, oh my gosh, if you could do it, I could do it too. And so that you can start to see move. There's times in some of the support that we had in our entrepreneurs in India actually as well, where the barrier to entrepreneurs that we have to get to get a loan, to get a car, to be able to move forward was actually getting a divorce from an estranged husband, because if they didn't have their divorce, they could not get a driver's license, and then they couldn't get capital. That was the barrier for the business. And so focusing on that actually and helping them finalize something that was a reality already, was the kind of thing that could unlock them to do things. I think that, sometimes it can be tough doing something that's very difficult. And sometimes it can be tough emotionally doing something that's difficult. I would flip the script. I think that if you're trying to do what everybody else is doing, looking at the world today, when all of our systems are struggling, there is not one incumbent president or head of state in a democratic society that's doing well. When you look at, or at least the vast majority, are struggling, and I think it's because a lot of the structures in our society were designed in a time, oftentimes 200-300 years ago, that are simply not designed and made for the day in which we live, for the problems that we're currently facing. For me, placing all of my energy in something that never works, that would be depressing. For me, spending time trying something new that might replace that someday in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years and 40 is actually much more inspiring, because yes, this one might not work, but when you're looking at 1,000 flowers blooming, to ultimately replace some of the business models, some of the structures, some of the systems that are currently failing today is actually an incredibly inspiring environments to be in, even when it doesn't go well, because that if you're trying something new, most of the time you're not going to get it right. So the hope is really on what you're aspiring to do and what you're hoping to do, rather than that very project, that very technology, that very entrepreneur that you're trying to support at the moment.
Well, Todd, it's all about shaping the future, and shaping the future with right people, with right organization, with right skills, and with right setup. And I love that you and your team, your company does that. And we'll keep rolling this moving forward. But right now, we have to again run into a quick break, Todd. And guys, the moment we come back after this short break, Todd will break down how SecondMuse supports entrepreneurs in climate tech and well-being, and why systems thinking is key to building lasting change in businesses. So on the other side of the break, I'll see you again. As a coach or a consultant, your focus should be on transforming lives, not struggling to get clients. That's where my company Amplify Media comes in to help you not just scale your business, but to consistently give you the revenue that your business deserves. We actually build a done-for-you lead generation acquisition system that brings in clients consistently, so that you don't have to worry about where the next client is coming in. You focus on the most important thing that is scaling your business and impacting your own coaching clients. From high-impact marketing and scroll-stopping content to expert funnel creation, we take your business from point A to point B with precision. Coaches and consultants worldwide trust the company. We have over 277 plus clients, case studies all around the world, help tons and tons of businesses scale. So your next level is waiting. Let's make your brand unforgettable, and visit the website today. I would love to offer you a free strategy session to share with you how we can help scale your business. Thank you. So guys, welcome back to the Empower Entrepreneur TV show. This is your host, Rohit Soni. Todd, let's talk about entrepreneurs. Let's talk about the heartbeat of innovation. SecondMuse has a unique approach of supporting them. So let me get you on the stage again. So what do you guys do to support entrepreneurs look like at SecondMuse? Can you walk us through how you help them go from idea to impact, especially in climate tech or in well-being sectors, which we were discussing during the last segment?
Yeah, absolutely right. So, as I mentioned before, when a cookie cutter approach to supporting an entrepreneur is a really terrible idea, in my opinion. It is so hard to build a business. I've built 7 or 8 businesses myself. before prior to SecondMuse, it is very, very, very difficult to build a business. So if you focus on the wrong thing because somebody who was trying to help you gave you the wrong advice, that can be very costly for the for a business. So we focus a lot on the actual problems that the businesses are facing and really try to understand the actual industry so that the support that we provide, of course, the financial support that we provide is always going to be helpful, but the directional and strategic support is just as helpful, if not more. So one of the examples is we've been supporting, over 100 mental health startups. Mental health is a very big challenge. If you look at adolescent mental health, there are tragic numbers. Adolescent depression and isolation, and even adolescent suicide has increased tremendously when you look at these numbers over the course of the last decade. And so this is an area that we focus on because we see this as a big opportunity to generate value. Obviously a good market opportunity, but also a really opportunity to help humanity. We have a program called Headstream. It's supported by Pivotal Ventures. And one of the things that these adolescent mental health startups try to do is to try to get into schools, to help schools address the problems of mental health that they ultimately have. I was actually recently at Davos speaking about this with some colleagues in the similar space. And one of the challenges, though, that they face is that schools themselves are oftentimes very overwhelmed. And so it's very difficult for them to assess technologies. It's very difficult for them to understand and figure out which technology to get and which technologies to bring in. So what we will do is that we have a program called the Headstream Residency Program that basically matches appropriate technology with the right problems that school districts are ultimately trying to solve. And so that's one example where it's the kind of thing that would be very, very difficult to do as an entrepreneur because you want to be working with 100 school districts or 200 school districts or 500. And so it would be very difficult to go from school to school. And instead, we can do that where we're trusted both by the entrepreneur as well as the school to figure out where's the right match and to do it. Similar to in the climate tech space, with the incorporation and integration of, whether it's AI or whether it's new manufacturing technologies, oftentimes as a founder of or entrepreneur, you have to be an inventor and you have to be a marketer and you have to be a salesperson and you have to be, a manager. And very few of us are all those things. I would say it's very rare to have somebody that is all those things. But if you're good at a few things, then you can rely on somebody else who helps. We've taken 33,000 prototypes, technologies, to test them in the market. We've supported well over 2,000 real businesses. Some of those prototypes turned into businesses and have raised, almost $1.5 billion through the process that we did. It helps to have somebody that's done this before so that you can help not just that business, but the whole cohort. And again, all the entrepreneurs that are coming behind them as well, ideally, is what you're going to do. And so these are a couple of the really unique ways, understanding how to manufacture something and making a relationship with somebody that can help you manufacture something. We have a number of examples of those.
So, like you said, can you shed light on some of the examples of entrepreneurs? Because I'm loving this and I really want to know, and our audience would love to know, is like few examples of entrepreneurs or startups you have worked with who have gone on to make significant impact, and what made them, according to you, Todd, stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the programs that we do a lot of work with is with Climate Tech in New York. We had a startup called Urban Energy, and they had a modular solar canopy solution is basically what the solution was, and they would need it to scale it. And so they had joined the For Climate Tech program, which is funded by the New York Energy Research and Development Authority. So the state is supporting this, and we are the contractor on behalf of the state to run this program. And by the time that the program ended, this startup, Urban Energy, had received advice from technical experts, and they were able to change their product from steel to aluminum to make sure that it was actually a lighter weight, but also it was going to be easier for installation in the case of their startup. Another example was an industrial technology that used a combination of sensor and AI technology to be able to reduce industrial costs, sometimes up to 30%. We work really closely with this startup to help them get acquired by a much larger company that was going to use their technology to be able to incorporate it into their own solutions. And so sometimes it's in the making of the physical product. Sometimes it's developing a relationship with a larger multinational corporation that might be the kind of company that buys you, that acquires you eventually. As we know, most of these climate tech startups are not going to go public, and so sometimes when you want to see an exit, and a lot of times if you have investors, particularly in venture investors, they want to see you sold to another company. A lot of times we can make those introductions to where it's going to be. There's also been a lot of times over the years, where we would work with companies like IKEA or with Nike, where we would set up pilot projects. So one of the biggest things that you want to do when you're building a new technology is that you want to be able to build a relationship with a big company that will ultimately buy your product. And that's a very difficult thing to do individually, because the companies have a hard time assessing too many new technologies. And if you're an individual, how do you navigate a company that has 200,000 employees or 100,000 employees? It's very difficult. And so oftentimes we will provide introductions and even join meetings just to make sure that there's right communication on both sides. So from a relationship standpoint, from a funding standpoint, from a product design and development standpoint, from a recruitment standpoint, these are concrete ways where we will support the business. And each business is strong at some things, but will always be weak at other things, because that's just the nature. That's just the nature of entrepreneurship. And so those are a few examples of concrete things that we've done.
Well, Todd, I'm loving it. And I'm loving these examples. And one of the things that I've learned is in entrepreneurship, or even in any business, like suppose your company, as in SecondMuse, there are times in each company where you have to step up your game, where you feel like, oh, are the things I'm trying, are they even working? Are you even getting the results? Are you actually hitting your real target? So have you ever been into that situation where you feel, am I doing the right thing? Am I actually going after the impact that I chose this business for? Because sometimes as entrepreneurs, sometimes you feel like, oh, is it working? Is it really worth it? And yes, I'm putting all these efforts in. Is there something I can do better? Like, tell me a little bit more on that, because people right now who are watching this show may be in a place where things are not working out for them. They're feeling burnout. How can they overcome them? And how can they keep getting the results that the top 1% like you guys do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and anybody that tells you that they have not gone through that situation is not being honest. I mean, I have absolutely gone through those things. I continue to, and I guarantee you I will.
I too, and I completely agree, both of us. So anyone who is trying to build something is going to go through that. So they need your advice, Todd. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing I would say is don't run away from that conversation. Anytime you're struggling with something or something doesn't feel right, don't pretend like it's not happening. Don't run away from it. Don't try to make it feel better. Like, if something doesn't feel right and is not working, try to address it as head on as possible. There's times in the development of SecondMuse where we have done that, and we lean in, and it's very difficult, but we move on very rapidly. And there's times when we haven't done that, either because we didn't want to have a difficult conversation or there. And in those cases, the problem will never go away. It'll just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until it gets so bad that you have no choice but to deal with it. Now, sometimes these are relationship issues. Sometimes these are strategic issues. Early on in SecondMuse, in the very early days, we ended up doing work for a client that ended up representing 70-80% of our revenue, but we were no longer doing anything related to impact. Everything that it was, and we were growing really, really fast, but it had nothing to do with our original mission. And we made the decision to completely eliminate that revenue stream and to go somewhere else. But we didn't have a clear idea where that somewhere else would be. And that I think that decisions like that ultimately saved us. I mean, within a year, we had similar revenue to what we had when we cut off the 70% of revenue before. Sometimes it's the product or offering that you're doing in the market, where if you don't make a shift, you're going to die a really slow death. Whereas if you just make the shift immediately, it'll hurt a lot more in the short term, but ultimately it could be the difference between surviving or not. Sometimes it's organizational. We grew 3 years ago or so, 4 years ago, we tripled in size over the course of a year and a half, 2 years. And that became very difficult because when you're a much bigger organization than you used to be, all of your systems stop working. And so you're no longer able to grow. You're not able to make effective decisions. You're not able to manage effectively. And so we needed to take a step back and understand, why was this not working, and effectively build everything from the ground up that is designed both for our current size, but also for our ability to grow. And so I would say that in all of those things we found that, and the biggest advice is, don't pretend like it's not a problem. Go against your instincts to move away from pain and move straight into the pain, because that's the only way that you're gonna get through it. And with most pain, kind of going back to how we started the interview, you're going to come out much stronger than you were on the inside, and it's going to unlock energy for you to face your next challenge.
Well, it's all about overcoming challenges and understanding if you can actually do it from or not. And it comes deep down. If I can do it, 100% I can do it. If I feel I can't do it, I've already lost. That's the mindset that I have. And sometimes thought in situation where things are not going the way you want, you quit, and you don't do that. But still, that happens to most people. But again, it's all about willpower, because if you can go from a place of having in a place where you become even a refugee or someone who had gotten to the challenges you got, it's all about mental toughness, right? And with that, we got to run into a quick break again, guys. And up next, when Todd comes back before this main event of the show, Todd will talk about what it means to build truly inclusive ecosystems and how we can prepare for the future before these crises that's happening around the world are going on. So stick around, and I'll see you right out of this short break. As a coach or a consultant, your focus should be on transforming lives, not struggling to get clients. That's where my company Amplify Media comes in to help you not just scale your business, but to consistently give you the revenue that your business deserves. We actually build a done-for-you lead generation acquisition system that brings in clients consistently, so that you don't have to worry about where the next client is coming in. You focus on the most important thing that is scaling your business and impacting your own coaching clients. From high-impact marketing and scroll-stopping content to expert funnel creation, we take your business from point A to point B with precision. Coaches and consultants worldwide trust the company. We have over 277 plus clients, case studies all around the world, help tons and tons of businesses scale. So your next level is waiting. Let's make your brand unforgettable and visit the website today. I would love to offer you a free strategy session to share with you how we can help scale your business. Thank you. Welcome back to the Empower Entrepreneur TV show. This is your host, Rohit Soni, as we are wrapping up our incredible conversation with Todd by exploring the systems behind change and the future he envisions for entrepreneurs and communities. So, your work focus is not just on businesses, right, Todd? But on ecosystems, on strategies. So what does building a truly sustainable and inclusive ecosystem mean to you, and what elements are often overlooked in this process with all these years of experience that you have seen?
Yeah. So I think that so it's interesting. A lot of times there's a bit of a false dichotomy, which is that economies that are going to be good are kind of aggressive, or that would be the business or the collection of business that would do good. But if you want to be kind and you want to be compassionate and you want to be sustainable, then you can't be badass. You can't be just strong work. You can't take incredible technologies to market. And there's this weird false dichotomy where it's like either good for people, good for planet, or the economy. And this is a false dichotomy in our opinion, and one that I wholeheartedly reject. We see an 80% success rate in our entrepreneurs. over the course of the 17 years that we've been doing this work, which is significantly greater than what you're going to see as the average that's referenced in the literature. The fundamental premise of our thesis on economic growth is premised on good relationships. If you have an entrepreneur who has good relationships with people that can help them think differently, well, when they're in hard times, and all of us will go into hard times like we just talked about, then you will have support and an ability to navigate your way out of those hard times. Whether that's something like COVID coming down, whether that's something like the global economic order or system being disrupted, whether that's because of a natural a disaster that you saw over there, whatever the reason, we're all going to have to adapt, and we're increasingly needing to adapt as entrepreneurs. And so the key to that is going to be healthy relationships and good relationships. And so anything that you're doing with economic growth, we should not conflate the idea of economies being transactional. If an economic transaction loses a relationship, it loses its future. And so in the same way that an athlete trains to be able to react quickly, if you're a professional athlete, you spend hours and hours and hours every day, just to be able to react to the unexpected. The equivalent for that in our economic worth is, instead of training your body, it's training your relationships, building strong relationships. Because when you have this relational infrastructure, then anything that happens that's unanticipated, you don't have the response of just one person who's good at some things but bad at a bunch of other things, because that'll sink you. What you have is a community of people that are able to balance each other out to give you a much better response. And so we believe fundamentally that resilient economies have to be inclusive. Because if you don't involve all the people in the area where economy exists, and that there's certain people that aren't participating, well, then you're just not going to be as creative. You're not going to be as smart. And so for us, it's not just we never make the moral argument for building an inclusive economy. We don't make the moral argument for building a sustainable economy. We actually make the economic arguments for it, because an entrepreneur that's surrounded by people that actually want them to succeed, that actually care about them, that actually will help them when they need, that entrepreneur is more likely to succeed. And guess what? That investor that invested in that entrepreneur is more likely to do well. And so there's a direct link when we think about economic upside, as well as relational infrastructure, as we think about economies and as we think about these markets. And so even when we're doing research, we're thinking about, how does the research make relationships stronger? How does the transaction make relationships stronger? How does the strategy make relationships stronger? That's one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Well, that's amazing, because it's all about, if you do the right research, Todd, you can perform better, right? If you're getting better at your art and you do your own homework well, that would be a lesson for each person who's listening to this show today, is you got to have your homework done right? That's why, guys, I tell everyone to have notes, right? So you said it before, right? You aim to empower people to solve problems before they arise. So what does it look like in action, especially in today's uncertain environment where anything's happening every day? And let's not just talk about US, because everywhere in the world, people are taking significant actions, which some like, some don't like. So if you were in a place in those shoes, what would you do from a journal perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I hate to say it depends, but it's vastly different depending on what industry you're talking about, what market, what part of the world you're thinking about. One of the trends that we're heavily focusing on, and we're advising our clients, and that we're in the programs that we're running as well, because again, we do strategy and advisory work, but our DNA is operational. So like where we live is in the actual development of the markets and the economies, and the support of the entrepreneurs, even though we do sort of strategy and advisory work. One of the things that we're seeing is a move to more local and a move to more state. This is not to say that that you don't think about the global market, because you always think about the global markets. But one of the things to think about, if you're a city or if you're a state or if you're a country, is really thinking about building the infrastructure locally to raise entrepreneurs that already have ties and roots in your community, instead of trying to import entrepreneurs with tax incentives or something else like that. So that's one of the big trends that we see to city and state to kind of go over there. Second one is focus on the economics. For our climate technology business, we've very much been focused on just focus on the economics. Like, you might be saving greenhouse gases, you might be having environmental upside, but at the end of the day, you're also saving money in industrial efficiency. So just focus on that. And so we don't try to get caught up into political whips when you're trying to build a business. Stick to your core value and develop your core value. The other thing that we see, particularly in the mental health side, which I think is really interesting, and particularly in that adolescent mental health, is that the voice of the youth that are being affected by a lot of the issues are being centered in the solutions. So when you center your customer, your client, the person that you're trying to help or address at the center of your solution, you're much more likely to get it right, and you're much less likely to get affected by the whipsaw of the economy. The last thing that I would say, and I think that this is mostly when we advise multinational corporations, sometimes cities and states, is there are fundamental, like, AI is not a technology; it's more of a mega trend. Like I think about it more of as a mega trend than I do about than a technology. But diversity is going to be your incredible friend in this case, because when the future becomes more and more and increasingly difficult to predict, you're going to need to diversify your presence to make sure that that you're able to adapt effectively into a future that is becoming increasingly impossible to predict.
Well, I keep loving what your takes on it, and I can keep talking about it. Maybe we need to schedule another show for that. But Todd, one last thing that we'd love to know before we conclude the show is, looking forward, what's your biggest hope for SecondMuse and the broader entrepreneurial ecosystem that you're helping build for the next maybe 10 years from now, 5 years from now? What's the big goal? And I believe the link is in the description right now, so everyone, you can click it and see how you as an entrepreneur or you as a company or organization be benefited from this. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about your goal and the objective, and how it can help people. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, at some point we meaning most of humanity, we took this path for economic development where we bought into this idea that economies needs to grow at tremendous costs to the human family or tremendous costs to our environment. This is fundamentally not true, but worse than not true is that it's not even smart economics. It's not even good for the economy. And so the work that we've been doing for the last 17 years, we had an increasing body of evidence that shows that when you build economies and when you build markets to uplift humans, to uplift the fat, to take care of the planet, you actually end up with very, very good economies. When you are more inclusive and make sure that the infinite diversity that is the human family all comes together and shares ideas and learns together, you get better products that perform better in the market. You get more creative solutions. You anticipate changes in the markets in a much more effective way. And so my great hope is that as a human family, we set aside this idea that economic growth needs to come for this extraordinary cost, and we embrace the reality that the only economies and the only markets that will survive into the future are the ones that do include all of us and that do not undermine the natural environment on which our lives depend.
Well, it's all about adjustment. Here's what I've learned today. Okay, it's all about adjustment, determination, using the right systems, maybe connecting with a company like yours in order to go from point A to point B, so I can achieve. And you guys, because you're experienced, you can bridge the gap. So I'm to all our viewers, I'm dropping every link for SecondMuse in the description for you to check it out. On top of that, Todd, I really love to say it, man. I'd love to have you again on my show. And it's been an honor having you with us. Your work is a reminder that true innovation starts with empathy, community, and a system-first mindset. So thank you for sharing your vision and insights with our audience today. Any last thoughts you want to share with us before you leave the show?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rohit. I mean, please do reach out to us, SecondMuse.com. We'd love to have a conversation with you.
Thanks a lot, Todd. You have a good day, my friend.
Thanks you too, Rohit.
So yeah, that's the conclusion of another episode. An amazing guest today, Todd. He shared a lot of things today with us, and I believe this was something inspiring coming from someone who has been through adversity in his career at the start. And I would like you to guys to understand, right? This thing that I usually tell, but I've never mentioned this on the show, is as long as God wakes me up, I can do anything. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're into business, if you're into any endeavor that you're running, I would love for you to focus on your goals, focus on your true targets, and don't ever let the outside noise affect how you behave in front of the world. Because if people like Todd can do it, he's a human at the end of the day. His message was very simple. If I can do it, you can do it. His company helps a lot of people as well. So if your mission is as big as his, why not give yourself a shot in doing something like that? Or at least doing something for you at the very start. So guys, this was an amazing episode, and I would love for you to watch it, share with someone who maybe needs to hear it, make notes. It will help you out a lot. But yes, I'd love for you to create the change and become the empowered entrepreneur that you truly are. Thanks a lot for joining us. Have a great day. Success isn't for the chosen few. It's for those who choose to show up, take action, and never back down. This is the Empower Entrepreneur, hosted by Rohit Soni, airing across 185 countries, 26 plus TV networks, and 100 plus podcast stations. You've heard the strategies, you've seen the mindset. Now it's time to execute. I'll see you next week, every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. Go, build, dominate. Until next time, stay empowered.